All right, I'm going to just quickly go over the midterm exam so that people understand what the answers are and maybe why I took points off in certain places. So the first question, we have this guitar thing that we're supposed to keep track of, and you're supposed to create a UML diagram to model this guitar. And so this is basically the solution here. We have the name of the class. We've got all of our private instance variables, so manufacturer, type, and cost. Notice that num guitars is underlined. That's because this is a static variable, so anything in the UML diagram that's static needs to be underlined. The minus is because these are all private. You'll notice that the instructions told you that you were supposed to make two constructors, so that's why there's two constructors here. I didn't specify whether you needed arguments or which particular arguments you needed. So you could have just basically picked anything as long as they had different arguments. And notice that the constructors don't return anything. So there shouldn't be a void or anything like that. Then we have our getters. Again, the getters, they're public. They shouldn't accept any arguments. And they should return the type of whatever it is you're getting. So manufacturer is a string, so this is returning a string. The get num guitars is underlined here to be static. It didn't necessarily have to be. I don't think I took off points if you decided to not make it static. And then for the setters, so the setters do accept arguments. They set an argument for each thing that you're setting, and all of the setters should return void. Finally, there is a toString method. The toString method accepts no arguments and returns a string. And then the getSoundByte accepts this file name as a string and it returns an MP3 object. Okay, so in doing this particular question, there were a number of people who forgot to list the name of the class. Okay, you need to list the name of the class so people know what it is. We had people who had the constructors returning void for whatever reason. Constructors don't do that. Constructors don't have a return type. For this one down here, there were a lot of people who, for some reason, couldn't figure out that all you needed to do was just put MP3 here. So if this function is going to return an MP3 object, then that's just what you put here. You don't put string or anything like that, because that's not what I said in the instructions that it returns. It returns an MP3 object. For the toString function, toString does not accept arguments. Okay, there were some people who made the toString function accept arguments, and that's not correct. That would be actually overloading the toString method, and that's not what we want to do here. Let's see. Making sure you underline the static variable num guitars. That's something that needed to be in there. I don't believe I took off points if you didn't underline the getters or the setters, because you don't necessarily have to do that. Let's see. The getters should never accept arguments, and they should always have a return type of whatever it is you're getting, whereas the setters should always accept arguments, and their return type should always be void. And then there were a few people who, for whatever reason, just didn't read the instructions carefully and forgot a second constructor. So if you didn't put in a second constructor, you lost points for that. So that's basically the UML diagram. And then the toString method, basically, I was looking for, you needed to make it public. It needed to return a string. It should be named toString in exactly this format with no arguments. And then it should return a string. And so the string should have all of the different information about the guitar. In this case, I returned the manufacturer, the type, and the cost. You could have returned the number of guitars if you wanted to do that as well. I wasn't very picky about the formatting, whether you put in labels or anything like that. This was just what you needed to do. There were a number of people who put a jOptionPane.showMessage dialog here in toString, and that you don't do that in toString. toString returns a string, so whatever actually calls toString might decide to use jOptionPane show message dialog, but toString in and of itself shouldn't ever have a JOptionPane show message dialog. It should just be returning a string, and then that string would be used by whatever called that. So that's basically the first question. Okay, so the second question, we had this loan data definition class, and then we were supposed to create this implementation class that makes 25 loan objects where you prompt the user for each value, and then after you collect all of that information, you display a message indicating which loan has the smallest monthly payment. Okay, so here's how I chose to do it. Again, there's more than one way to do this, and as long as your logic was sound and you used the object-oriented principles we talked about in the class, I tried to give you credit for that. But so here's how I did it. So I have the number of loans. In this case, I put it to 3, but it actually should be 25. So I'll go ahead and change that right now while I'm thinking about it. I changed it to 3 because I was testing it, but so that's 25. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a loan array of size 25, okay? And then I've created 2 methods here in my implementation class, a collect method and a print lowest method. And all I'm doing is I'm passing it that array of loans so that I can use it. So this collect method is the one that's going to do the bulk of the work. Basically, I'm going to have a for loop that loops through the entire contents of the array. In the instructions, I said you didn't necessarily have to worry about prompting for a specific number or anything like that. So you can just loop through the entire array. Then I have my normal Boolean done equals false, do, try, catch structure that we've done in all of the programming assignments. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, I'm going to collect the principal, I'm going to collect the interest, I'm going to collect the length. Then, this is the key step right here that a lot of people had problems with. Once you've gathered the principal, interest, and length, you need to actually instantiate a new loan object, okay, which is what the right side of this equation, or the right side of this statement does. And then you need to put those results inside the proper spot of the loan array, okay? So loan underscore array is the loan array that's coming into this function. And so I'm just using loan array sub I because that's the particular loan where I'm at in the loop. And if I make it through this statement here, then that means I have instantiated a valid loan. And so at that point, I can jump out of this do while structure and move on to the next loan. So here are my basic catches. And so that's basically the bulk of it. For the printing the lowest, again, I accept an array of loans. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the lowest payment equal to whatever the first payment is. So in other words, loan sub 0 is the first loan in my array. So I'm going to grab that payment and I'm going to set that one equal to lowest. There were a lot of people who decided to set the lowest payment to some arbitrary number like 100,000 or 9,999. That's not really necessarily a good way to do it because what if you had loans that were all higher than that, right? Then your lowest payment wouldn't be initialized to the correct number, okay? So I'm also going to keep track of where in the array that lowest payment is. You didn't necessarily have to do that. I didn't take off points if you didn't. Some of you did, some of you didn't. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to loop from position 1 to the length because I already handled position 0. I'm setting that one initially to the lowest payment. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the current payment by calling the calculate payment method and assigning that to a variable. And then I'm just going to see if that payment is less than the lowest payment that I currently have, then make that current payment the new lowest payment, okay? And then save that wherever that position is in the array. So that's all that this is doing right here. And then at the end, I just do my show JOptionPane where I print out the loan that has the lowest number. So that's basically the midterm right there. If you have any questions about the midterm, go ahead and either send me an email or post something on the discussion board, and we can try and answer any of those questions. Thanks.